Imagine you woke up and you looked out into the morning. You saw it shrouded in darkness, the mighty with all their power, the merchants with all their control, and you felt fear every morning of your life. But imagine you woke up one day, one fine sunlit morning, completely free of fear. You looked behind the curtain of the world system and saw how they created money backed by fear, and how the so-called mighty ones were actually bound by fear, which used them to enslave our world. On that morning, in the light, you saw clearly the illusion. You took your stand in commerce, and its merchant officers backed down. You went into courts of law, and judges ran. And when you wielded the sword of truth, the most senior civil servant in your country abandoned his post. You awoke in the light. You found the keys, and something changed. Where you were once imprisoned, now there was an open door. So you began to travel the land, telling others. Speaking the truth of a bright, sunlit morning.
I'm Josh Del Sol. Like many of you, I want to be part of a greater solution for our planet. And since 2013, when we released the documentary Take Back Your Power, the number one thing many people continue to say to me is, okay, so we get how the government and utilities insist on deploying this invasive and dangerous technology on our homes without our consent. But what can we effectively do about these so-called smart meters? What we've come to realize is there's simply so much at stake. And there are good people within the socio-political system, but the system itself is corrupt. So what is the next step? On my journey toward a solution, I have become friends with a man who, over the past 15 years, has come up with a roadmap based on his own astonishing experiences and results. He discovered the power of liability and how we can now use it to create real change. The story you're about to see is a true story. It's a story about all of us. It's a story where we can truly be in power. I want to introduce you to Cal Washington.
So Cal, you're active in this movement to help stop the corruption and hold these companies that are deploying these radiation surveillance meters accountable and liable. Why are you doing this? What values do you have, and why do you feel inspired to do this?
Well, it's at the point now where if the planet keeps going, or what we're doing on the planet keeps going, we are going to self-destruct here. We can't keep going the way we're going, and something has to change. And there's those that are in control or think they're in control, who have an agenda, and it's destroying the planet, and it's going to destroy human life and a lot of other life forms on this planet. So we have to turn around and go the other direction. And so I have to take whatever I have, my experiences and my understanding, and do something with it. And this is the opportunity that came, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Everyone has this sense of there's something not right, and it's something fundamental. There's like a fundamental fraud that what I thought was true, I'm finding out is not true. And that can be traumatic for people. But we're all kind of collectively as human beings having that experience.
And you can see it in the uprisings in other countries, and they're trying to keep it out of the news, etc. But there's a definite feeling of dissatisfaction here, like there's something wrong. Once you understand why it's happening, then you need to understand what to do, and that's what this is all about.
So it turns out there is a way we can actually hold individuals within corporations and governments accountable for what they are doing. And this has the potential to change everything. The next 40 minutes is an overview of how this works. Moving forward, we'll go deeper in future episodes. So Cal, what is this notice of liability process that you have helped to create that we are bringing out? How would you describe it in 30 seconds or less?
It's basically a counter offer of a contract that is being implemented to put a device on everybody's house. They've got us into a tacit agreement. This clarifies it and expresses the counter offer in such a way that those that don't want the meter can say, I don't want a meter, and if you do put a meter on my house, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars per day, per month, per week, whatever, however you want to do it, in order for you to carry out this contract.
We followed Cal as he was invited to present his experience and this liability action to several groups throughout North America.
So what's happened here with the smart meters is that they have given you an offer to put a different gadget on your house. You already had a contract, they're trying to change it. They do it by tacit agreement. If you don't say no, you've said yes. So everything has to be done that way. It's all contract. And once you can learn this kind of thing, you can start to operate at that level. So it's a level playing field. So now things they try to do to you, you can see it for what it is and counteract it because it's all contract. And contracts have to be negotiated. So there's always a meeting of the minds. That's what we've done with this document. We've taken commerce, which is the Babylonian system of money, and we're using it, their type of contracts, tacit agreement, all the tricks that they do, we are using it against them. And they'll tell you you can't do that and that's bunk and all that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, I've seen enough high-level officials run from this who know a lot more than I do, and they're scared of this. So it does work. It's all about liability.
So basically, this process of the notice of liability is applicable for anyone to use, whether they have an analog meter, a so-called smart meter, or anything in between. Even if they have previously given their consent for one of these radiating surveillance meters, they can do this process at any time.
Yes, because as you come into knowledge, even though you agreed to it, you agreed without full disclosure, so that contract is null and void, and this is now the new contract.
So in what countries is this system of commerce the system, the way that things run?
I would say every country. It's worldwide. It's a worldwide system. Commerce can be used for any issue on the planet, any country or anybody that's doing commerce, which is pretty much the whole planet. This is the system that's kind of hidden, and now you can actually use it.
What this talk is about and the action we're doing is basically we're saying that all these illusions, these Wizard of Oz type things, we're saying you as a human being are now liable. You can't hide behind your position in a corporation or in a government. What I've noticed in all my dealings over the last 12 or so years is everything has to be done by contract because there's no authority. It's all commerce. Once you understand that and you operate at that same level as them, not in ignorance where they've tried to keep you, the game changes. It's a game changer. You're now playing the proper game in the proper court. Put it this way, a game, there's a board that has a bunch of squares, some white and some black. They've got you playing checkers while they're playing chess. It looks the same, Once I got into this liability thing, I had some key public officials step down when they got their notice of default or when bills started coming. And it was always about 3 or 4 times it was on the very day they got mail. And then other cases it was about a week or maybe 2 weeks later. I'll tell you who quit on the day that he got mail. And you look this up. It was written in Maclean's and the Globe and Mail and all that stuff. Kevin Lynch. He was the clerk of the Privy Council. That man knows more about banking and instruments like I showed you in the Bills of Exchange Act, all that stuff than I do. He ran. There was no court. There was no lawyer. He just went, this guy knows this, I'm liable, I'm out of here. And you can read it. He had a press conference in the morning and didn't announce any kind of retirement or anything like that. And by noon, no notice. Carol Taylor was another one. She was the finance minister in here. Same thing. Day she got her default, left politics. And that's after I got a whole bunch of letters from the Attorney General saying you can't do this and this is all bunk and there's no basis of law for what you're doing. But at the end of the day, she left.
At this point, you might be wondering, what do people stepping down from positions of power have to do with getting a smart meter off my house? And how can we simply stop this and other globalist agendas?
At the top of the pyramid, where the problem lies, they can't do everything. So they have coerced, mostly with money, in order to get the agenda to actually happen on the ground. Mm-hmm. So if you start removing all those people that are just under them, it stops. Who's gonna actually do it if they're gonna be liable? Without people actually implementing their schemes, there are no schemes. Somebody has to actually fulfill this. They're motivated by money. So if there's a document that is enforceable that is going to take more money away than they are getting, it's just, do the math. Why would I continue with this when it's going to cost me? I may be getting paid 10 million, but I'm going to have to pay 300 million over here. Well, I'm out of here. So if the liability is more than what they're going to get out of it, then it just doesn't make sense to carry on. Yeah. The whole idea is to wake the people up that are participating, saying, no, you're going to be liable if you continue this course of action, whether you understand it or not. You're going to be liable because nobody is immune to it.
In a few minutes, we'll look at some initial seed group results and how the action works. For now, let's look at how the current corporate rule has actually been functioning, so we can take back our power on multiple levels. So Cal, in the United States, how is it that we the people appear to no longer have our constitutionally recognized rights?
Mostly because there's an assumption that you've given up the rights in order to receive benefits from the corporation. Social Security being the biggest one. The fact that you're taking benefits from a corporation means you have to also obey all the rules, so they just start to use that as leverage in order to get their agendas through, so that we're agreeing to all of this.
Most of the countries on the world are corporations, not really countries. They're operating as countries, but it's really a business. And they're in the business of, they create laws in order to make money, so that's why when you get a speeding ticket, it costs you $119. Anything you do that breaks some kind of statute, you pay. It's just a business. It's not teaching you anything, it's not making you a better human being or anything like that, it's just a way of paying.
I needed to verify that countries are actually operating as corporations. It didn't take long to find that in the US Code, United States is defined as a federal corporation. And on the US Securities and Exchange Commission website, Canada is in fact listed as a company located in Washington, D.C.
And we go and vote every 4 years thinking we're going to change something. And anybody that's voted for any length of time knows very little changes. It just seems there seems to be an agenda that always is running in the background, and it doesn't matter who you vote in, the agenda keeps going. So I want to give you a diagram. This is the basic idea of how a jurisdiction works. This is you, and you work at Walmart, and you work in the automotive department. And there's a manager there, and he said, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars per hour, and you have to show up here and put hours in as I say. And you go, okay, I agree to that. Now, what if the automotive guy tells you, I want you to show up on Sunday night at 2 o'clock in the morning when the store is not open? You could go to the manager of the Walmart store and say, this guy's trying to make me come in when we're not open. That's against your policy. The automotive manager cannot make you do something that's outside the jurisdiction of the Walmart store. Now, the Walmart store is in Detroit. This is a corporation. So now Walmart, because it's in Detroit, has to obey the rules of Detroit. Now, outside of Detroit is Michigan. It's a corporation, and Detroit is subject to the laws of Michigan. Now, Michigan is inside what is called the USA. It's another corporation, and Michigan is part of that corporation. Now, outside of this is the real USA, the original republic. Unfortunately, they sound the same. So people think that they're here when they've agreed to be in here, just like you agreed to go here. And there's people that are wondering why the Constitution doesn't work in courts. Because the courts are here. So when you bring the Constitution in, they're going, that has nothing to do with us. You think you're here, but you're actually here, and that's the biggest problem. What you have to understand is this is subject to this. You just got to approach it in the right way. They don't tell you this, though. You're assuming you're here, and they will let you think that, but you're actually here. And you're there by agreement, just like Walmart. Now, there's another set of laws called the law merchant. This law merchant is a set of laws to govern what we call commercial law or admiralty law. Outside of this USA, and actually part of this Republic of USA, which is the original, this is where the Constitution is what's called the common law. So the United States was founded on the common law, as was Canada, and they are still both functioning, but you got to know how to invoke them. So once I understood this and I learned a little bit about a law merchant, and then I knew that Canada was a corporation, and I knew that the courts were just another corporation inside that, I started treating them like that. This is just business. And you guys are subject to these outside things. So as long as I'm out here, I'm above you. And so I started trying stuff. I went into court, and we usually wait outside the courtroom because I don't like doing all the bowing to the judge. It's very ritualistic. So we waited till my name got called, and we walked through the door. Big door out because it got paged. They obviously called the case in the courtroom, and then when I didn't show up, they page outside. So we walked through the courtroom, and as I'm walking into the courtroom, the judge is running off the bench, full flight, cape blowing, out the door, and I went, what was that? And everybody else in the room was the same thing, like, what's going on? And so the sheriff goes, all rise? Like a question, I guess we're having a break?
Do people have lesser rights if they're represented by a lawyer or by an attorney?
Well, your rights never disappear. You waive them in order to be represented by somebody else. A judge will look at your actions. So if you come in saying, I got this right and I got that right, but you're represented by a lawyer, he's going, no, he, in his mind, he's just looking at you, no, you don't get it, you don't have those rights. You can say that all you want, but you've waived them. So he will assume that you don't have those rights, and he will make his judgments safely accordingly.
Is that why traditional legal processes, especially in issues of magnitude such as the worldwide agenda to deploy radiating surveillance meters, is that why traditional legal processes don't seem to be successful?
Exactly. Because they've taught you to go and fight down here, play this other game in courts and all that stuff, and that's what we believe is where the remedy is, and they're just looking at you, well, sorry.
We have already seen in Take Back Your Power examples of how the system has singled out and wrongfully arrested a handful of those on the front lines. It's a tactic meant to inspire fear of speaking out. Let's hear about Cal's experience on the front lines a few years ago, which led to the foundation of this liability action.
After the judge ran off the bench, I got arrested probably about a year later for driving without insurance. They thought, well, let's go after this guy. So they arrested me at work, and I ended up doing 60 days in jail. Throughout this 60 days, my friends put in a promissory note for my incarceration because this is just a business. My incarceration has to do with money. That's all they're interested in. So they put a promissory note in and said, can you let our guy go, right? Basically paying for my incarceration. So after my 60 days, they finally found me guilty. She gave me a $1,200 fine. She tried to impose a 5-year driving prohibition, and she gave me 1 day in jail. So I said, well, if you try and give me the 5-year driving prohibition, you're going to be causing me harm. So she dropped that right away, and the prosecutor went, like, why did you do that? Because I'm treating her like a business. I'm negotiating with her. And she knew it. So she dropped that. And then I said, on the 1 day in jail, she gave me 59 days credit. So I said, I want to talk about the 59 days credit, because that seems like how do I get 59 days credit, right? So I got 1 day in jail and 59 days credit. So she said, okay.
All right, this is an important point. In offering the 59 days credit, right after Cal just did 60 days, the judge publicly admitted on the record that Cal was wrongfully imprisoned. But you can't give time back, and both the judge and Cal realize this.
I said, the 59 days credit that you just offered me, in business, has to equal the amount of a promissory note that was put in by my friends. And she goes, what? And I said, there was a promissory note put in by my friends. She goes, what? And everything's done in threes. And so I started to say it again, and then she goes, okay. She says, where was it put? I said, I believe it was put at 222 Main Street, where I was in the court. And she goes, okay. And where in the courtroom? I said, with the clerk of the court. She says, okay. So I said, I want the 59 days credit you just offered me to equal the promissory note that was put in. And so she said, okay. And she goes, how much was the promissory note? And I said, $300 million. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. There was a lot of lawyers in the back behind me, and they all were shocked, and she just about swallowed her tongue and put the gavel down and left the room. So I made a deal with a corporation called the Court, with the banker that's sitting on the bench. Through all that, I ended up writing a document very similar to what you're going to see. And what ended up happening was a bunch of people in high-level politics left their job without notice. What I'm showing you is a very similar document to this that has ramifications that make people in very high places very uncomfortable. I also want to show you that this jurisdictional idea actually keeps going. So the document that I've written goes into these upper jurisdictions, which are what we would call spiritual jurisdictions. Now, they're not seen, but I can tell you when you start to write documents to the Queen, etc., which I did, and call in her oath, you start to see them getting very squirmy. So you know something's there.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
So when government officials in the United States, for example, swear an oath to defend the Constitution, they do so up here. But meanwhile, they're running their corporation down here and assuming we're all down there with them, because that's what our actions indicate. When we receive benefits from the state, or when we petition or appeal, or even when we vote, we are doing so down here and thus agreeing to their claim of legitimacy. So the next time the age-old question comes up, how the heck can they be getting away with this? You now have your answer. It's by our unconscious agreement. But as the system of oaths is still running up here, that tells us that the Constitution and the Republic are both still functioning.
Public officials that, like the governor, they've all taken an oath of office. They've only promised to do one thing. That's all they promise is they support, when they take an oath of office, they say, I promise to support the Constitution. All you have to do is accept their oath, and this is my strong opinion, because I'm just looking for a way to stop the madness. They've taken an oath to support the Constitution. You accept their oath in writing, and they're obligated, there's a contract between the two of you. So if they don't honor your constitutional rights when you put them on notice, in my strong opinion, through my research, then they're not protected by their title. They're personally liable because they've stepped outside their role.
So once we're aware of this, we can then operate from up here. We can call any government agent on their oath, and we can invoke their liability. By the way, this is the same setup in Canada and virtually every country. We'll learn more in episodes to come, but for now, let's investigate more into how all this is actually working on the ground.
Considering that there's all these amazing results happening from Cal's experiences with the system, could it be that there's more going on than just coincidences?
You look back at all the coincidences that I had, it's staggering. So even the most analytical mind would go, no, there's something going on here. So that's why I kept going forward with certain things and dropping other things, because I could see what was working. We learned a deeper commerce, which is very similar to what notice of liability is, and through that process, once I got to the default stage, that's when a few people left office. 2 ministers of finance, and possibly at least 2 others, but 2 for sure were knee-jerk. About 8:30 in the morning, I got a call from a friend, and he goes, "Do you have anything to do with Kevin Fulton?" And I went, "Faxed him something last night." He said, "Well, he stepped down this morning." I said, "Well, it might be a coincidence, but this is before 9 o'clock. Like, he's out of there. It's on the news, right?" By the end of the day, I think 3 others had stepped down, and by the end of the week, 16 were not seeking re-election. So then I got the federal type people involved and saying, okay, now your office, here's what your mandate is. You have to do this, and if you see a crime in progress, you have to do something about it if your position has that as part of its mandate. So that's how I implicated all the federal people, because here's a crime in progress, you need to do something. Mm-hmm. They didn't. So they went into default. And that's when the clerk of the Privy Council stepped down.
Do you ever have any people like on judges or politicians or people like within that box encourage what you're doing? Maybe they're wanting to get out of it, but they wanted to support what you're doing?
This is even in the beginning. I had some judges, because of the questions I was asking, I had one judge go, "You seem very sophisticated, keep going." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I didn't understand that even meant, right? But she could see that I was asking the right questions that would get to the root of the problem, and she said, keep going. And I had police officers who would shake my hand at the end of our encounter, and also say, keep going, I know what you're doing, keep going.
So the smart meter agenda is a worldwide thing. It's operating above countries. It's happening worldwide. It's not just happening in Kelowna. It's not just happening in BC. It's not just happening in Canada. It's going all over the globe at one time. So that means it's coming from some place that's outside of the idea of a country. So you got to understand that. This is coming from a very high level.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something.
So let's pause for just a moment and reflect on where you personally are in your relationship with what you're learning today. If you're feeling like this is all too much information at this time, we encourage you to take what resonates and set aside the rest for now.
Tomorrow? Oh, but I want to go home now. You're not around.
And keeping in mind that you can engage in the solution coming from pretty much any perspective. Let's continue.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
6 years ago, smart meters were pretty rare. Today, 60 million consumers have access to detailed information about how much energy we use, how we use it, when we use it. So we can use that information to change our habits.
The most exciting thing for me is that we have an entire organization that's gotten behind data as an asset for the first time in our company's history. And we get a lot of data. We do 221 million meter reads a day, which creates about a terabyte of data every day. We can mine that data. CenterPoint Energy actually works with a variety of government entities in terms of ensuring that we are well positioned.
Use energy more efficiently. Change this fast presents new opportunities.
In early 2015, a high-level utility commissioner admitted that the residential surveillance data gathered by smart meters will be worth a lot more than the electricity itself, which is a $2.2 trillion market. So how far would they go, the corporate elite masquerading as government, on their conquest for money and power? What you're about to see may truly shock you, but it is very important now that we all see the type of mentality in the policy think tanks of our so-called government.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that. I would just like to suggest that one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why?
War is a game to the sociopathic. Human lives expendable. Rights unimportant. This disgraceful example we just saw is relevant to us because we find the same way of thinking behind all agendas bent on control and money, such as the deployment of so-called smart meters. Take away the propaganda and spin, and we see a silent war with quiet weapons, which undermine, infiltrate, and colonize. These actions, just like crisis initiation, are deplorable, anything but constitutional, and deserve justice.
I call it treason. And somebody's got to start saying this stuff, right? So you can't spy on people in their homes. That's in the Constitution. Here's the definition of treason. Adhering to their enemies, giving them aid. So if, whether they're a mayor or it doesn't matter what it is, they're helping this thing in, that's treason. But if you go in here and talk about it, they're going to ignore you. You stand out here and you talk about it, that's a whole other thing.
This smart meter thing is a huge problem. There are people leaving office as we speak because the game is over. The lights are going on, the bugs are in for the corner. And what I'm showing you here is they have a huge problem here, and if you guys can catch on to this, we can make big changes.
So why are some people that are made liable stepping down and others not, or not yet?
Well, it comes down to those that are really vested with the situation, that are psychopathic, are probably not going to step down because they just thought that they have a way of thinking that's different than how most humans think. So there's that case. There's the case of what a lot of people do is they take this stuff to a lawyer, and the lawyer goes, "No, this is bunk. Don't worry about it." So then they take the advice of a lawyer because that's how they've been trained.
There's other information out there, and there are some lawyers who understand this. So I'm trying to teach you how the game that they're playing at their level, and this is what scares them, because they have to take the liability.
As Cal was customizing the liability action for the smart meter issue, 3 initial groups in 3 different regions have applied it, and the results have been interesting to say the least.
A couple of years ago, I demanded that they show me a signed act, who signed it, and who's indemnifying the Clean Energy Act, and I got no response. So then, once I got to that stage, they were basically in default, but I didn't send them the default notice because I was waiting for you. And you finally showed up 2 years later, where there's a group of people who are like gung-ho, ready to do this, and you got to the second stage. And so I sent the notice in on Tuesday. And I sent it to all the people that you sent to. There was 25, plus the 5 people that I already sent to. And I also sent to give notification in the US. So that just happened on Tuesday. So the mail would have probably been, some of it might have got there yesterday, and some would be hitting today and or tomorrow. And we'll see what happens with that.
On January 30th, 2015, the CEO of Corix Utilities, the installer of these meters in British Columbia, received more than 100 notices of liability from people in Kelowna. On February 4th, he received a separate notice of default from Cal. On February 4th, the CEO of Corix Utilities resigned from office. It's worth noting that this action was also sent to the chair of the BC Utilities Commission, and in late 2015, he quietly resigned as well. Kelowna was one of the 3 initial groups that began to implement the liability action. Let's take a look at what's happened so far in the United States with groups in Seattle and Detroit. After being defaulted by just 21 people, 3 of the 9 Seattle City Council members announced they would not be seeking re-election, including one who resigned before her term was up. And on March 13th, the defaulted CEO of Seattle City Light, the 10th largest public utility in the nation, announced his resignation. In Detroit, it is all out war. The utility DTE has cut electricity to several homeowners, including the elderly as winter approaches, as part of what could only be called a campaign of terror. After being defaulted by another 21 individuals, the Michigan Attorney General began calling for a free opt-out. 4 of the 8 officers in the Michigan Public Service Commission who are being held liable are no longer listed on the Commission's website. And a city attorney in Warren, Michigan has also resigned, but not before sending a letter to one of the claimants stating that the utility has a budget of $20 million set aside for paying off state legislators. Especially at the outset, we can expect some resistance. In the Detroit seed group, 13 out of 14 who started with an analog meter have successfully kept it. The 14th was heavily propagandized and, like several others in the Kelowna seed group, eventually accepted a supposedly disabled smart meter. And in New York, a lawyer named Andrew Pedersen wrote a commercial liability process very similar to our liability action.
To the governor, to the head of PSE&G, to the head of National Grid, to the head of New York Power Authority, and to the head of the New York State Public Service Commission. And I sent it out and I put them on personally, accept their oath of office, and I tell them that they're violating my rights, and if they don't stop violating my rights, I'm holding them liable for $300 million each. She got a phone call the next day after the letters went out, my letter, and it was then certified, and he said, "We're so sorry that I don't know why they were threatening you, but you don't have to have a smart meter. I'm sorry, we'll never turn your water off." So it does work.
And in January 2017, a group of several dozen on Maui sent a modified version of Andrew's liability document and notice of non-consent to the president of their power company, which had been planning on blanket installations.
The next thing that happened was the proposal was rejected by the PUC, and the utility company came up with a new proposal. And the new proposal contained nothing about rolling out smart meters, and it contained nothing about an opt-out. In fact, the utility pretty much completely reversed themselves and went from the blanket in the islands and you have to pay to opt out to now, if you want a smart meter, you have to opt in.
You have to give explicit consent for the utility to install one.
Correct. I mean, I wish that we could trust the utility, but we don't trust them. We're not just kicking back and going, hey, we've won, and we can, go on vacation to Hawaii.
I spoke with an anonymous insider working at a utility where the executives are being held liable.
Well, I'm an employee with a major utility, and what the utility here has done is they have put together what seems to be like an actual war room filled with newspaper clippings, photos of the actual activist leaders themselves, photos of what people do to block the radiation. Some seem very successful. Copies of flyers for events, copies and photos of the locks with the notices beside them, with liability actually stated on the notices. And they're taking very seriously this action by people who are fighting back. They seem to be nervous about it. They don't seem to be as confident as they portray to be around here.
So here's the plan. Phase 1 was about seed groups with a limited number of participants. And while there is no way to say for certain what factors are involved in each resignation, liabilities are indeed resigning. With the launch of the InPower movement, we are now in Phase 2. And with your participation, along with thousands of others, our goal is to stop this agenda completely. While the same liability action can and will be used in Phase 3 for other major issues where harm is being done, the target at hand is to get these so-called smart meter devices off all of our homes and return to safe and sane technology. Let's learn more about the principles behind the liability action.
We're going to talk a little about contracts and the smart meters. And here's what has to happen in a contract. So if you've sold a house or a car or bought a car, this is the procedure you go through. This is a simple contract. Obviously contracts can get very complex, but this is what has to be in there, those 4 things. So they put an offer out there, so they send everybody a little flyer or a card or something like that saying, we're about to do this. And then they wait for a long enough period of time to go by. And if you don't say no, then they go ahead. And then once there's an offer, then there's a meeting of the minds and negotiating of terms. So you have to give full disclosure. You can't hide stuff, otherwise it's an invalid contract. Now you had a contract with your utilities, and they're trying to change it without full disclosure because they're not telling you how bad the meters are. They're lying about it. It starts with an offer, there's a meeting of the minds, negotiating period, then there's an acceptance, and it has to be unconditional. The minute there's conditions on it, then the conditions have to be removed, right? It has to be unconditional. So when you bought your house, you said, I will buy it, but I have the condition on making sure I have the finances, or I'm on the condition that my house sells. And then the seller can agree to that or not agree to it. That's how it works. Once that's all cleared and there's an unconditional acceptance and everybody's happy, then there's the actual exchange. So that's how a contract works. So a conditional acceptance is a counteroffer, but it has conditions on it, and the conditions have to be met, otherwise the contract doesn't move forward. Consent is what they're trying to get from you for these meters, and they get it through tacit agreement. So what we're going to do is take control of that contract. And once you understand contracts, then you can get in the driver's seat of this thing, right? And there's nothing they can do because we're operating at a high enough jurisdiction that they can't get on top of you. If you come and put the meter on, I'm going to start charging you. Yeah, I'll take your piece, but you got to pay me $10,000 a day. That's my agreement. You put the meter on, it's going to cost you. Do you still want to do this contract? That's what we've done with this document. So we're going to tell them they got to remove it. It's a 3-part process because that's the system, so we have to use their system against them. We restrict the jurisdiction. They can't take this into a court. This is a private agreement, just like buying a house. This is a private contract between you and that person over there. And because they put the offer out, this is the negotiation, and these are our terms to their contract. Okay? And if you understand the power of that, because they put the offer out, they can't back out. They have basically exposed themselves to a contract. They were hoping you wouldn't understand this.
So they've been cheating us because we haven't understood how it works.
That's correct.
But now with this notice of liability, we're giving that tool into the hands of the people.
Yes.
So we're conditionally accepting their contract offer to install this device that radiates and surveils us in our own homes. We're doing a conditional acceptance with our terms, including a specific fee schedule.
If they can't prove that there isn't a harm, then it's going to cost them money. And so money is what makes them think that they're thinking money, right? So you have to talk to them in money terms, not in this is hurting me and they don't care. The notice of liability does give you the opportunity to do a lien. It has the ability to have a grand jury and get people for treason in the U.S. You can use debt collectors. All those things are available once there is a verified debt. So we need to consider what our motivations are inside, because if you're into it because you want to get some money, then you're into it for the wrong reasons, and you will get different results. And so if enough people do this, it will stop because nobody wants to take liability on.
What are the steps necessary after sending the initial notice of liability?
Well, then you have to send in a notice of fault that they haven't answered you, if they don't answer you. And if they do answer you, but it's not how they're supposed to answer you, then you send them a notice of fault saying that this is an insufficient answer. So then you give them another opportunity, which is grace, and that's again a biblical principle. So you give them another chance. At that point, then you put them into default, and then there is no more chances, and then the billing basically can start once they either put the meter on your house or done whatever is contrary to the terms of the contract.
Okay, so what do we need to do as awakening human beings who care about our planet, who care about our families and our children and our grandchildren? What do we need to do to make this potential reality real?
Actually do it. That's all. Send in a notice of liability. If we, the people, actually do something, there's nothing that anybody can do to stop it. It can't be stopped. If enough people on this planet wake up to what's really going on here and fix the problem at a fundamental level, the planet would run way better, and everybody would live in plenty. Everybody would live in a better, harmonious way.
We are at the beginning of that new sunlit morning, where we can see the world in a different way, where we have real hope and the ability to turn the tables. The first step to do after watching this video is to go to the website InPowerMovement.com and sign up for the Notice of Liability action. We will be with you and thousands of others, step by step, giving you everything you need to know that will affect change in your home, your community, and the world. After you sign up for free, we will send you an invitation to watch episode 2, guiding you through the process. We can finally affect change together. Go do that now, and we'll see you in the next episode.
You guys are involved in something huge.
I have to say, when I first passed out these letters, that some people responded by saying, wow, that's a really intense approach. And, you know, gosh, do you really think we need to do that? And I said, yes, I really think we need to do that. And so people did it. And finally, we are getting results.